Well, BJ, obviously huge excitement ahead of Anzac Day. Just take us, I guess, first, if you could, through the preparation in terms of how it's adjusted, given that big break.
It was a few more days off, thankfully. Players always enjoy a day off here and there. So, saying that though, it's still important to having a big break to train really hard. So our mindset around training is not changing, albeit we're not here as much. But yeah, it's more about taking the opportunity with a big break to rest and recover, because you do get limited chances throughout the year, bar our bye in the middle of the year. So a chance for that, and then when we're here, it's really about training with the intensity that we've shown the last, say, 6 months.
Just one more on that. So, for example, Sunday is the main session.
Yep. Yeah, Sunday. So obviously changes because of the weekend and Wednesday game. So in here Saturday and Sunday is our full training day, which is obviously abnormal, being a weekend and training fully on a weekend. We're obviously here on weekends before and after games, but that's the only part that's really differs. We don't get a weekend, but that's football, and we're used to that. We don't get public holidays either, so it is what it is. Being a Wednesday game and being a part of Anzac Day.
Do you soak this up a little bit more now, Brendon, as you come towards the back end of your career, that days like Anzac Day?
I think when contemplating moving from St Kilda, one of the attractions was coming to Essendon and playing in Anzac Day, or the attraction was playing in Anzac Day. So I don't think I'll soak it up more than I did in my first Anzac Day 6 years ago. So it's a special occasion, and as players, we're very privileged, and a footy club, we're very privileged of being part of the day.
Every home and away game is important, but I guess this has got extra significance this week in the fact that you guys are coming off a very strong win, as are Collingwood, so it's going to be uber competitive. Uber competitive,
yeah. Yeah, it is, and they obviously had a terrific win over last year's grand finalist, and then we were able to beat Port Adelaide on the weekend after a couple of disappointing performances. So, yeah, it creates a bit of hype, which is good, but yeah, it's a game against Collingwood, so regardless of the previous week or previous results, it's always a pretty big game, and as we know, it's on Anzac Day, so just to play a small part in the day is a privilege.
Huge variability in your performance, which to your credit you turned around against Port. Will you guys address that this week, that inconsistency?
I don't think so. I think based on the performance on the weekend, we'll dissect that, look at the positive and negatives, but consistency is what we're all striving for as footy players and footy teams. That's what the best teams do. Top 4 teams are consistently good all year round, all their performances anyway. They mightn't get results every week, but they give themselves the best opportunity, and that's why we've finished 7th last year and lower in previous years, is because we struggle to find consistency, which all those teams do from, you say from 5th down to all the way to 12th now, because it's so competitive, but it is about finding that consistency and consistency of effort, and therefore, as I said before, giving yourselves the best opportunity to get the W.
As a leader of the club, does that frustrate you, and how do you drive that when it's so much about intent last week?
How do we drive it? It's about consistency of the messages and the things that we value and we focused on during pre-season, as we talked about last week. We took ourselves back to what we value and reminding ourselves of how we want the game to look and what are our strengths, and obviously then touching on our weaknesses. But it's really simplifying things and driving consistent messages, and that's training. I know it's easy to say, but at training when we're here at the footy club, because the games really are just a reflection of your preparation. So, and there's also a responsibility of each individual to take it upon themselves, and with the help of the coaches and one another, is to get into a mindset and a frame of mind that allows you to compete to your best of your ability, which again will give ourselves the best opportunity to perform and get the win.
Brendon, a lot made this week about Hooker playing back and Stringer playing forward. What's your thoughts on the ideal optimum setup in that regard?
Well, there's always an option. It was always probably going to come at some point, but I think it's a real strength having that flexibility. Carroll's shown he can be a dominant forward last year and the last couple of years playing that role, and Jake's obviously had a lot of success and really reached his potential, or played to his potential in that role as a forward. So saying that though, that Jake wants to grow his game and add another string to his bow and become a midfielder, probably not full time admittingly at the minute, just to his engine, and he is a power athlete, so building that aerobic base, but he wants that flexibility, as does Cale, to be able to go forward and back, and then to have that as a team is a pretty big strength.
And is the Sard Stringer Smith addition, is that sort of gelling more slowly than you'd like, or perhaps in line with expectation, given it takes time, A, to get percentage game time in the middle, and B, I guess for guys to become familiar with the game plan on each other?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it there. Knowing how difficult it is, or leaving clubs and coming to another club, it does take time, particularly when you've got 3 guys coming into a new environment. Not only is there the footy side of things that we see on the weekend, but there's also the personal side and the relationship building that takes time within the footy club and to feel comfortable. So to have 3 guys come in of their character and ability is real positive, but it does take time. So we obviously all love it to happen instantly, but that's not the reality. So I think they're tracking pretty good.
How have you rated Joe Daniher's first month, Brendon? I guess he'd had some frustrations and some positives. How have you rated it as a teammate?
Oh, look, he's probably not playing to the expectations he puts on himself. And that's the most important thing. And the expectations from teammates are just buying into what we value and stuff. So in terms of his goals and impact on the scoreboard, it obviously hasn't been as impactful as it has in other years. But I think that's a real strength. We managed to get 2 wins without Joey really firing. I think a lot of people thought that it was kind of a one-man band up there with Joey. So if we can keep adding that flexibility with the smalls and talls, and Joey not having to be that focal target, and getting more up the ground, and again getting more flexible in his role instead of just anchoring deep forward, I think that's going to be a real strength come later in the year and potentially in the future.
A lot of external, I guess, pressure or expectation on him. Do you think that's had any effect going into this year? I mean, some talk about him being the best forward in the comp and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's all external hype. So internally, we don't talk about individuals like that, and I'm sure Joey doesn't think that. He's a pretty level-headed kid or guy. Yeah. So yeah, that's all external hype. So there's no. Yeah, the only area that's coming from is outside the footy club, so we don't buy into that.
Just one from me on that, BJ. I realise it stems partly, I guess, from his enthusiasm, but just when he gave off that handball, did the leadership group, in particular experienced guys like you, take him aside, go and have a beer with him and say, Joe, no pressure, but we're backing you in that situation?
We haven't had a beer over it and had that discussion, but there's numerous chats like that. There's also a responsibility of, in that particular incident, Greenie, calling for the ball, because as footballers we instinctively react to a teammates' voices. So there could be an argument there that Greenie and the other forwards around him allow him to go back and have his shot and convert from where he was, rather than run past for a handball. And because instinctively that's what you've got to do, and we've been taught, and we tell each other to do that. You hear a voice, you trust your teammates in a better position than you, and you give the handball off. So there's an argument for both, but yeah, we'd love Joe to go back and convert those opportunities, particularly at times of the game like it was a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, instinctively it just happens, so there's an argument for both sides of it, I think.
He obviously, he was probably best on ground last year, I think, Joe. Do you think certain players like that can relish those big occasions? Or do you think he just played well on that day?
Well, it is. I think from my experience playing in big games, you can't think like that. It's almost a mental burden coming into a game, thinking it's more important than any other game. It's a bit of an indictment. I think all footy clubs have talked about a bit of footy lingo, but getting yourself up for big games or clashes or milestones, they're really why are they more important than any other game? Every 23 rounds, 22 games we play are as important as any other. So yeah, there's more people watching. It's Anzac Day. We play a small part in the day itself, but you simplify things and just talk about doing the simple things well. For longer and more consistently, and then let your natural talents take over, which obviously Joey has an abundance of that.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you might have. Did you have a job on Pendles last year? Was that last?
Was it Anzac Day? I did that. Some part of it, yeah. So
could you have a job on him or a Steele or someone like that, where you sort of not running with?
Well, they're doing that these days. So apparently it's a new trend in the AFL to midfielders to play or be accountable to one another. So. That's something I've done in the past. It's something other players have done, and every team does it. So, but if that comes up, it does. But I think most of my footy will be played in the back half, like it has the first 4 rounds.
Thanks, BJ.
Thanks, Brendon.